Uncle Sam wants you not to join the Army this time, but to pay the taxes you've avoided while saving for retirement. I'm Wes Wood, the Income Guy and founder and president of Wood Financial Group. And for nearly 20 years, I specialize in helping hardworking Americans just like you reach their retirement goals through income-based financial strategies. And hey, if you're looking for the right solutions to achieve your own financial goals, I can help. Just reach out to me at retiretv.com or by calling 855-776-0614 during today's show or at any time. As we all know, there's no such thing as a free lunch. That's certainly true when it comes to the government. So Uncle Sam gives you what seems like a free pass on taxes while you're growing your retirement savings, but that money really isn't tax-free. It's only tax-deferred, and that deferment ends when it's time to take out your RMDs, or what's called your required minimum distributions. That's when you need to start taking money out of your accounts every year and pay the taxes on it. And as with everything else, there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way. The right way reduces the burden of your RMDs and your stress level, and the wrong way could put your retirement income at serious risk. And we're going to show you how on today's show, do your RMDs right. RMD basics. We're going to cover what, when, and how much. And we're going to discuss the biggest RMD mistakes you need to avoid. And finally, the right strategy for RMDs and how to get started. And joining me on this week's show is David Scranton. David is an investing for income specialist with over 30 years of experience. He's also a best-selling author and a television host. But before we welcome Dave, let's answer some of those basic questions about RMDs. Starting with, when do they start? And well, you might be aware of this, but the Secure Act was passed. The Secure Act was passed in 2019, and what it did, it actually raised the first distribution that you have to take out from age 70 and a half to, say, age 72. Specifically, the rule is you must start taking your RMD by April 1st of the year after you turn 72. And that RMD rule applies to all employer-sponsored retirement plans, including 401ks, 403bs, and 457s. And it also applies to traditional IRAs and IRA-based plans like your SEP IRAs, your SAR-SEPs, and your simple IRAs. But how much are you required to draw? Well, at first, your RMD equals about 4% of your IRA balance. Then, it's going to increase every year as you get older and as your life expectancy gets shorter. And you can calculate your increase for yourself by using the IRS publication 590-B. It gives you a table with a government assumed life expectancy for each age after the age of 72. Just take your balance of your IRAs and your qualified retirement accounts as of the balance of December 31st of the previous year and divide it by this life expectancy figure. I know it sounds simple, but remember, this is the IRS, so of course it isn't simple. There can be many complications depending on your situation. For example, there's a separate formula that exists for IRA owners whose spouses are more than 10 years younger. Usually that RMD ends up being quite a bit less. The bottom line is this, that you need to calculate your RMD correctly. Because if you don't, you're going to be hit with a whopping 50% penalty. So, now you know when to start your RMDs and how to calculate them. But now when you're taking them, how much are they going to be taxed? And we're going to talk about David Scranton in just a bit. And as always, you can hear more right now or at any time by visiting retiretv.com or by calling 855-776-0614 to receive your free retirement income kit. But right now, let's welcome David Scranton. He's the founder of Sound Income Strategies and the Retirement Income Store. David, thanks again for joining me this week.
As usual, it's great to be here with you, Wes.
Yes, sir.
So give me your opinion. Yeah, I've got my theories. Give me your opinion. Why do you think the IRS, why do you think they pushed out the minimum distribution age from 70 and a half to 72?
I think they bumped it out 1.5, 2 years because people are living longer life expectancies, and they know people probably need to have more in their retirement savings accounts to retire. Because now people are living, longer than just 20 years in retirement. People are living 30 years and maybe even a little bit longer. So it just gives people the opportunity to let the money grow a little bit longer. So it's probably longevity. At least that's my opinion.
Now, a moment ago, you implied that there are complications in some cases with calculating RMDs. Do you mind sharing two of the most common ones?
Yeah, there's two. So if you've got different retirement accounts, meaning if you have IRAs in one place, and then you have 401ks or 403bs or TSPs, employer-sponsored programs, left at an employer that's not yet been rolled over to an IRA, it becomes much more complicated because you can't just satisfy all the RMDs out of one of the buckets of money. For instance, if somebody has a 401k that's underperforming and their IRA is doing great, you can't just say, well, I'll just take my entire RMD out of the 401k account to satisfy the RMD money. It must come out of each bucket of money and use the calculation for each of them. That's one. The second one that's a common problem is some people that have immediate annuities. That is just like the 401ks, there's a firewall that exists between those types of accounts versus the other accounts that you may have. So you need to satisfy not only the RMD out of the annuity money, but also out of the other bucket of money as well. And most commonly, that's where we see people really kind of get in trouble and have to pay that huge 50% penalty because they failed to calculate their RMD correctly.
Now, somebody, just changing gears for a minute to taxes, somebody comes in your office and they say, they paid an average tax last year of 20.7%. And they think they could take the RMD and multiply it by 20.7 and figure out how much additional taxes are going to be due. But it's not that easy, right?
No, it's not. They're failing to look at the tax brackets. So their marginal tax rate is probably closer to 24, maybe even 28%. It's the highest bracket that you're in. Because we need to remember that RMDs are going to fall on top of all the other income. And that's just not it. The other thing is that it could complicate things because it could make it to where more of Social Security is taxable than it was before. So it's always good to get prepared for RMDs and understand what the tax could be and what it's going to be for you in retirement. And there may be some proactive things that can be done before we get to that point instead of just paying a heavy load in taxes. But hey, Dave, stay with us, and coming back after the break, we're going to talk more about the wrong way to do your RMDs. Stick around. I'm Wes Wood. You're watching the Retirement Income Show.
A fiduciary is someone legally obligated to act in your best interest. Doctors, lawyers, and some financial advisors are fiduciaries, but not all. When you work with Wes Wood and his team at Wood Financial Group, you are working with fiduciaries. They help clients create customized investment portfolios based off their retirement goals. If you're ready to work with a fiduciary, visit retiretv.com and schedule a free, no-obligation conversation with Wes or a Wood Financial Group advisor.
I'm David Scranton. During my career, I found that most baby boomers have done a great job growing their retirement savings, yet many don't know how to convert their savings into steady income. And that is why I built the Retirement Income Store, to help hardworking Americans preserve their assets and establish steady streams of income.
If you're 55 or older, please claim our free Retirement Income Kit, chock full of information you need to know to get steady income during your retirement. Call 866-714-7377, online at theretirementincomestore.com.
Welcome back. I'm Wes Wood, the Income Guy. Hey, thanks for joining me today as we talk about how to do your RMDs right. So far, we've talked about some RMD basics, when they start, how to calculate them, and how they're taxed. Now, let's talk about how not to satisfy your RMDs. Once you've calculated your RMDs, the most important question to do next and to answer is, do I have the right asset allocation that allows me to satisfy my RMDs the right way? And if you don't, you may end up using the worst possible strategy, which is selling core shares of mutual funds each year as you're taking the distribution. This is an all too common mistake that can lead to disaster. I call it the mistake of reversed dollar cost averaging. Most people know how dollar cost averaging can help you grow your retirement savings. And the idea is to get your average cost of per share down to help you buy low and then sell high. That, of course, is the cornerstone of a good investment strategy. It's a strategy that can work well in the growth stage of your life. That means when you're in your 30s and your 40s and your main priority is to grow your savings. But the potential problem is now that you're past that stage, you're no longer funneling money into those programs, into your retirement accounts through your income. Now you're in your 70s, and you're in the stage of life where retirement income replaces growth on your priority list. You've reached that stage where you have to start taking distributions out. And if you haven't reallocated your assets properly to cover those RMDs, you may end up taking them by selling shares of your mutual funds each year. When that happens, the same principles of dollar cost averaging can still apply, but in reverse. That's because when you're buying shares to grow your savings and the market drops, it creates an opportunity to buy low and sell high. But when you're selling shares to satisfy your RMDs, a market drop can mean you end up buying high and selling low. And that's the exact opposite of what you want to be doing. In the end, it means that you're spending down principal to satisfy your RMDs. And that, my friends, is definitely the wrong way to do it. And I'll talk more about that with David Scranton in just a moment, and then talk about how to do your RMDs the right way. But right now, here's another opportunity and a chance for you to reach out directly to me at retiretv.com or by calling 855-776-0614 right now to receive your free retirement income kit. Now, let's welcome back David Scranton. He's an investing for income specialist.
Wes, in a minute, I want to ask you about this concept that you always call reverse dollar cost averaging. But before we do, even if the market doesn't have a major drop in retirement, you have another analogy used a lot of times to talk about why spending principal in general, if you're 70 years old, is probably a dangerous idea.
It is a slippery slope, and we call it the mortgage analogy, 30-year mortgage analogy. And 30 years is because a lot of people may spend that much time in retirement. But think about it this way. Like taking money out of a portfolio and spending principal is a lot like when you're paying off your mortgage over time. You're paying the exact same amount in every single month. In the first few years of that mortgage, you pay your payment and you notice it's like all interest and just a little bit of principal. But you keep making the same payment over 30 years, and towards the end of that life of the mortgage, towards the end, now you're paying all principal with just a little bit of interest, and it's paid off. Well, think about that in reverse. If you're drawing money from a portfolio, it's the same because you've got this big mound of money that's generating interest for you. In the first few years, as you're taking distribution out, it may be a lot of interest with just a little bit of principal, but towards the end, now it's all principal with just a little bit of interest potentially running out.
You know, it's funny, I could almost hear your viewers right now say, well, if I'm 72, I'm not going to make it 30 years. But you know, statistics show that if you're 72 and you're married, there's about a 50% chance that at least one of you can make it 20 years. And the math's really not that much different on a 20-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage, right? Mm-hmm.
Exactly right. And even just the stress, and we talked about it in previous shows, just the stress of watching the portfolio drain over time can really, put a burden and make people not really enjoy the retirement that they deserve if they're spending down principal over their lifetime.
So, okay, makes sense. Let's get back to your reverse dollar cost averaging argument. I've heard some people call it dollar cost ravaging. Yes. Maybe if you give a mathematical example of why this is so bad, maybe that'll help your viewers really understand the risks of using the strategy.
Sure. So yeah, here's an example. So let's say you're putting in $100 per month, dollar cost averaging. You're putting $100 a month into mutual funds. And let's just say the mutual funds are trading at $10 a share that month. So you bought, how many shares? 10 shares. Now, all of a sudden, we have a horrible month in the markets, and the mutual fund is now trading at $5 a share. But you're still buying the same $100 worth, so now you're doubling up the amount of shares. You're buying 20 shares. So a lot of people would think, what's my average cost? Well, it's $7.50, but that would not be correct. because you're buying many more shares at the low point. And what happens is it's pushing the average share price down to $6.56 per share. So if we do that in reverse, we're essentially doing the same thing. We may be selling 10 shares at the high, but then selling 20 shares at the low, therefore pushing our average cost per share down and cannibalizing the account over time through reverse dollar cost averaging.
Yeah, when you're buying, putting money in, it makes sense because you want to get the cost down because you want to buy low. Yep. But the formula is buy low and sell high, right? So now if you're getting your average sales price down, that's a bad thing. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, exactly. The whole idea of investing is buy low, sell high. We don't want to be selling low and buying high, right?
And I guess it's intuitive if you think about it. There's a lot of things in life that are really good in one direction and equally as bad in the other direction. You know, example I always use is toothpaste, right? Toothpaste works great when you're pushing it out of the tube. But Wes, have you ever tried to put the toothpaste back in the tube? It doesn't work as well, does it?
No, never does. So exactly. And thinking about, withdrawing money from a portfolio, we definitely want to avoid the reverse dollar cost averaging. And heck, if we can just spend the interest and dividends, meaning generating enough in the form of interest and dividends to cover our RMD, we don't have to fret over liquidating shares and potentially running out of money like that 30-year mortgage analogy, or depleting shares because we're liquidating many more when they're down through reverse dollar cost averaging. So if we just do it the right way and invest for the I instead of the G, we won't have to worry about doing that. But hey, thanks again, Dave, and stick around. Hey, coming up after the break, I'll share more details about how to do your RMDs right and the first step to making this happen. You're watching the Retirement Income Show. I'm your host, Wes Wood.
Retirement accounts like 401ks and IRAs are great tools to save for retirement. They offer tax advantages to help keep more money in your pocket. But withdrawing money from your accounts can have a huge impact on your tax liability. Take money from the right account at the right time and you could minimize it. But taking money from the wrong account at the wrong time could result in a big tax burden. If you're not sure what you should do with your 401k in retirement, visit retiretv.com to schedule a free, no-obligation conversation with Wes Wood and Wood Financial Group.
I'm David Scranton. During my career, I found that most baby boomers have done a great job growing their retirement savings, yet many don't know how to convert their savings into steady income. And that is why I built the Retirement Income Store, to help hardworking Americans preserve their assets and establish steady streams of income.
If you're 55 or older, please claim our free Retirement Income Kit, chock full of information you need to know to get steady income during your retirement. Call 866-714-7377, online at theretirementincomestore.com.
Welcome back. I'm Wes Wood, the Income Guy. Thanks for joining us. We're talking about how to do your RMDs right. So far, we've discussed RMD basics and the wrong way to satisfy your RMDs. Now, let's take a look at the right strategy. Making sure your assets are well allocated for taking RMDs is really just a matter of following some advice your mom and dad probably gave you. Live off your interest. Don't touch the principal. And that makes sense, of course. But there's a lot of things to consider in making sure your assets are generating enough interest and dividends to cover your RMDs. And in my experience, that means an asset allocation that's generating at least 4% in the form of interest and dividends. And the good news is that that can be done. And it all starts right here with an advisor who can help you for taking a shift in your strategy from growth to one focused on income. Remember, total return on most investments is the sum of both growth and income. Growth, the G, comes in the form of capital appreciation, while income comes in the form of interest and dividends. And if you're still invested for growth, when RMDs kick in, you run that risk of spending down your principal by reverse dollar cost averaging, as we talked about in the previous segment. But when you invest directly for income, you're typically investing in contract-based strategies, and they're designed to protect your principal and guarantee your interest and dividend return at a fixed rate. So how do the two compare? Well, since the year 2000, the average annualized return of a buy and hold stock market investor has been about 5% with interest and dividends factored in. By comparison, an income-based investor during the same period of time achieved close to 5% income annually and greater than 5% average annualized return. And they achieved it with a lot less stress and a lot less risk. And so can you. And it all starts with making that strategic shift from growth to income. Once you do, not only have you have a strategy now designed to make sure your RMDs are done right, but one that's tailor-made to help you meet all your retirement goals. In fact, you can start now by reaching out to me directly at retiretv.com or by calling 855-776-0614 to receive your free retirement income kit. Now let's welcome back income specialist and founder of the Retirement Income Store, David Scranton. Thanks, Dave.
Wes, I love the fact that you used my goal of that exotic car, because I don't think it's just me. I think it's a lot of your viewers that sat there in high school and thought, wow, this old muscle car, I really would love to have it, but just couldn't afford it. So I love it. And you know, we talked before in the last segment about it's kind of like being a permission slip to be able to spend the money. What we're really saying is it gives you the ability to spend that money with a clear conscience and to do it stress-free. So when you do get that thing that you've been, that you've had as a goal, in this case, the muscle car, you can actually enjoy it, right?
That's right. It's kind of like you've earned it, because you've earned it in the form of interest and dividends through your portfolio. And if you just spend those interest and dividends from the principal, not taking from the principal, but just from the interest dividends that principal is producing for you, it's just like any other type of form of income. It's there for you. And we know it's going to show up the following year and give you more income later on in life. And so, hey, if you took maybe a year's worth of interest and dividends, and it's going to, basically show back up in the portfolio the following year. And so if we know that we're not actually liquidating shares or taking from the account in order to do so, it definitely makes, at least my clients have much better peace of mind when they're buying things like that.
And one of the things I've always heard you said is the perfect retirement is having more income each and every year during retirement for the rest of your life than you need, because that way okay, let's say you had a medical emergency. Well, now you don't have to dip in the savings. You just delay that muscle car or that new kitchen for maybe 1 year, because 1 year's worth of income goes to medical emergency, and then you're back on track again.
That's right. That's right. And if you think about investing for growth versus income, it's really, people are much less likely to reward themselves just from growth of a portfolio. I used this analogy just a couple weeks ago, but I think it's important to bring up again. Think about if you had a $500,000 mutual fund. Well, if that mutual fund grew $250,000 to $750,000, you're probably not going to just liquidate some shares to buy that muscle car or to take that trip that you've always wanted to do. But in reverse, let's just think if that portfolio went from $500,000 and got cut in half down to $250,000, well, then you're definitely not going to buy the muscle car, and you may even cancel that big trip that you planned for. But the difference is investing for income is if you know that $20,000, $25,000 of interest and dividends is just going to show up again, well, maybe you save it up for a couple of years and then buy that sports car and reward yourself.
It's funny because what you're saying isn't just because the money may not be there. The person may have an account somewhere else where there's plenty of money to still reward themselves. But I think a lot of your clients are probably like you. You shared before, the reason you don't like to go to the casino is because if you win $1,000, you might get this much joy and pleasure. But if you lose $1,000, you'll get this much anguish. The pain is much greater than the pleasure. So emotionally, when people lose money, kind of like you're wired, right? They don't want to go and spend it.
That's right. I ask folks all the time, hey, if this portfolio happened to double in value, is it really going to change your lifestyle that much? And the common answer is no. But I ask them again, well, hey, if the portfolio gets cut in half, how is that going to make you feel? And you can see the pain. They say, well, I wouldn't like it, and I'd get very, very stressed out. So yeah, that's right. That's the problem with investing for growth there.
Yeah, and so you're not alone. It's a lot of people are wired that way. And, you know, as Socrates said, know thyself. As long as you know yourself and how you react with money, that'll help prevent you from doing silly things, bottom line.
Yeah, making some mistakes. And thanks again. And hey, I'm Wes Wood, the Income Guy, and I want to thank you for watching. And if you have any questions about anything we've covered on today's show, please reach out to me at retiretv.com or by calling 855-776-0614. Hey, thanks again, and we'll see you again next week.
A fiduciary is someone legally obligated to act in your best interest. Doctors, lawyers, and some financial advisors are fiduciaries, but not all. When you work with Wes Wood and his team at Wood Financial Group, you are working with fiduciaries. They help clients create customized investment portfolios based off their retirement goals. If you're ready to work with a fiduciary, visit retiretv.com and schedule a free, no-obligation conversation with Wes or a Wood Financial Group advisor.
I'm David Scranton. During my career, I found that most baby boomers have done a great job growing their retirement savings, yet many don't know how to convert their savings into steady income. And that is why I built the Retirement Income Store, to help hardworking Americans preserve their assets and establish steady streams of income.
If you're 55 or older, please claim our free Retirement Income Kit, chock full of information you need to know to get steady income during your retirement. Call 866-714-7377, online at theretirementincomestore.com.
Hi, I'm Wesley Wood, host of the Retirement Income Show, and I'm founder and president of Wood Financial Group. And we're a local independent financial services company that specializes in creating custom retirement solutions tailored to meet your particular needs.
Visit retiretv.com to learn how we can help you create a customized retirement portfolio.